Hey guys, it's Nathan from the Kentucky Cycling YouTube channel. In this video log, I wanted to provide an update on my recovery process 4 months following my rotator cuff repair surgery. For all the details about the nature of my injury and the specifics of my surgery, please refer to my initial vlog post, which I'll include a link to in the YouTube video description. At the start of this video, I wanted to say thank you for everyone who's inquired over the past few months as to how the recovery process is going. It was especially fun when my wife and I had a booth selling Kentucky cycling t-shirts at the Limestone Cycling Tour in Maysville back in September to have people I've never met before come up and ask me how my recovery was going. I think it just goes to show that cycling in Kentucky and the surrounding region is not just about getting to explore all the beautiful places, but the community of people who care about each other. So again, thank you. In reflecting about the nature of the recovery process over the past 4 months, I think it's safe to say that the physical therapy process has two main objectives. The first objective of physical therapy has been to increase and regain range of motion. The second objective is to rebuild strength in the shoulder. At the beginning of this process, I understood that the primary focus of the early part of physical therapy was to regain motion, and that the focus would shift at some point towards rebuilding strength in the shoulder. While that understanding is correct, I also thought there would be very distinct milestones along the way, so I could know that at a certain point I'd be able to do a certain task at predictable points in time. And while I think that holds some truth for the early part of my recovery process, one thing that you'll hear over and over again is that everyone's recovery process is unique, which for someone with a planning personality like myself was kind of a challenging realization. In my mind, I also envisioned that if you were going to produce a chart of the recovery process and you put time on one axis and the progress you're going to make on the other, I thought you'd have a nice straight 45-degree line that would only go up. The reality has been that while overall the line does go up, there are also some downs along the way. My physical therapist gave me some good advice, which I think is worth sharing to anyone who has to go through this process. And that advice is, don't try to gauge your progress from one day to another. Rather, think about your progress from week to week. And I think this was really sound advice, as you may have days where an exercise would seem easy for you to do a day or two ago is now hard, or you may have some pain or tightness that's impeding your progress. At the outset of this process, I was told by my surgeon that I could expect my total estimated time to full recovery to be 5 to 6 months. I have to say that I had a really hard time wrapping my mind around that in terms of what the recovery might look like. But generally speaking, progress is slow. The other thing you'll learn as you get into this is that the 5 or 6 months or whatever number you're given is really just an estimate. I've heard that for some folks it might be a full year before they're fully recovered, and while no one seems to talk about this prior to surgery, the reality is that some people may never make a full recovery. To be clear, all the messaging from my providers about my progress has actually been really encouraging. My physical therapist told me early on that he's been doing this long enough that he can actually tell pretty early on if someone's not likely to make a full recovery, and he said that there were signs that I should. Still, when you are 2 to 3 months into this and you reach a point where you don't feel like you're progressing, or you're starting to hear stories of people who haven't regained full range of motion, you may start to question if you're ever going to recover. I know I did. And to be completely transparent, I had originally envisioned that I would be making update videos along the way, and part of the reason that I didn't is because of the progress felt so slow that I really couldn't see the proverbial forest through the trees. So I didn't feel like I had something clear and encouraging to share. Now that I'm 4 months into this, I feel like I can finally see the light at the end of my own recovery tunnel. I'm very happy to say that as of the date of this video, I've regained about 90 to 95% of my mobility, and I'm actively engaged in trying to rebuild strength. And I find that I'm feeling much more optimistic about the process as a whole, and find that I'm in a place where I can finally offer some insights into the process that should prove useful for those of you who are either thinking about having the surgery or who may be at an earlier phase of the process. Specifically, I want to share 3 observations about the recovery process that I wish I had known about going into this, that I think that would have been able to help me manage my own expectations a lot better. The first two things have to do with a couple of milestones that I think most people can expect along the way. And the third is more of an observation about the process as a whole. The first big milestone for me came at 6 weeks when I got to get out of the sling. As much as I hated the sling, there was a part of me that felt a little nervous to be without it. In the first video, I talked about sleeping in the recliner, which I did pretty much exclusively for the first 4 weeks. By about the 4-week mark, I found that I could sleep pretty comfortably in the bed by laying on my back and then using a pillow to support my arm. So I would typically start the night in bed, and then if I got uncomfortable, I would move to the recliner. But when 6 weeks rolled around, I was very happy to return the recliner we had borrowed from my mother-in-law and just get to sleep in the bed. The other big thing that happened when I got out of the sling is that I could start driving again. At least in Kentucky, it's illegal to drive when you are in a sling without seeking special approval. And my surgeon advised that it took so long to get the approval that it's really just not worth pursuing. So getting to the point where I could actually regain some independence by driving myself around, including to my many physical therapy appointments, was actually a pretty big deal. I will say that I used to drive a stick, and I found myself feeling grateful to have an automatic when I first started driving again. I think it's also important to note that re-engaging your arm in activities like steering the car is really a process in and of itself. One really nice thing for me is that my surgery wasn't in my dominant shoulder, it was in my left shoulder. But that also meant that if I were doing something like going through a drive-through, I would actually have to reach across with my right arm and then, pass it back to whoever was with me or do all that because I didn't feel comfortable actually lifting my left arm out the window and reaching back and forth. It be kind of awkward at first, but it just gets easier with time. The next big milestone that I think most people will have is around the 12-week mark. My physical therapist said that this is really the point where most people will be able to regain enough range of motion where they'll be able to do most of the typical activities that the average person would do in a day. And your shoulder is healed enough to the point where you can do some weight-bearing activities like, say, carrying in groceries from the car. The big observation that I want to share about this process is just how much I would have come to associate pain with progress, particularly when it comes to regaining range of motion. For me, this is especially true in the first 3.5 months or so, but it really tapered off as I'm starting to regain full range of motion. Following the surgery, everything in my shoulder was just really tight, especially the tendon itself. And the exercises were aimed at slowly stretching that tendon out. My understanding is that not all physical therapists do physical manipulation. Mine does, and I could count on part of my visit being focused on his manually stretching out my tendon beyond what I was physically capable of doing myself. So the running joke became, how badly are you going to hurt me today? When you think about the shoulder, we're not talking about a single muscle or tendon, but rather a more complex group of muscles and tendons that all work together. So the other source of pain you encounter is when other muscles are having to overcompensate. When that happens, they become inflamed and can be very tender to the touch. In these instances, the physical therapist might massage or apply pressure to the affected muscle and try to get it to release some of that tension, which is effective, but also very painful. Again, I'm very happy to be at a point in the process where I don't have to associate progress with pain as part of my physical therapy. At this point in the process, most of the exercises I'm doing are aimed at rebuilding strength in the shoulder, which means that I've actually been adding weight to a lot of the exercises. Now, when I say weight, they start by adding 1 pound and then you gradually work your way up. Right now, the smallest weight I'm using is a 2-pound weight and the largest is a 5-pound weight. So in the big scheme of things, we're not talking about a lot of weight. But I can assure you that each time that they actually added weight, lifting even a little bit more, even just a pound more, was really a difficult process. So it's actually been pretty humbling. Still, I'm very grateful to come as far as I have in the process, and I feel very happy to feel like I can finally see light at the end of this very long tunnel. For those of you who are subscribers to the channel, I hope that you found the interviews I've conducted over the past few months useful. I can assure you that I've been doing plenty of research of places to ride and had plenty of time to grow my bucket list. So once I'm cleared to ride, of course I'll have to start out slow, but I'm definitely planning on making up for lost time. For those who are considering surgery or going through the recovery process right now, I hope you found this video useful. If you did, please like the video. And if there is a question that I can answer about my experience would be useful to you, or maybe some advice that you'd like to offer from your own experience, please include that in the YouTube comments below. Thanks.